really sorry. I apologize on behalf of Lokadaksha. He's got some meetings, so he won't be able to join right away. So this is how Maharaj Parikshit receives the age of Kali. And I'm going to share the screen. Just give me a minute. So we've been reading. Yesterday we talked about how Maharaj Parikshit, he was such a great king, and he was accustomed to drinking the nectar from Krishna's lotus feet. And then we also talked about Yamaraj yesterday, the controller of death. We talked about that if we simply just continue to hear the glories of Krishna, then Yamaraj, who everyone is scared of, actually will personally come and he will sit amongst us and hear this glory, the glories of Krishna. And in that way, we don't have to ever fear him because he has become our friend. And so we talked about that. And we talked about how people who don't have this understanding of spiritual knowledge and whose intelligence is stolen by Maya, they actually use their life in pursuits that are for nothing, just like a child making a sandcastle by the ocean. And when high tide comes, then the whole sandcastle is swept away by the waves. And so it's all endeavor for nothing. And so the Srimad Bhagavatam wants to redirect our attention to activities which are actually more, which are permanent and eternal and for our ultimate benefit. So we stopped here yesterday, so we'll continue today from this section. I think we talked from text 11. Yeah. So Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Namuttamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Nishtaki. So starting from text 11 all the way through text, I think it's 25, Maharaj Parikshit is going to tour his kingdom, and Dharma personified is actually going to question earth. So let's get into it and let's see what happens next. Swalankritam Shyama Taranga Yojitam Ratham Rigendra Dhvajam Ashrita Purat Vrito Rathashva Dvipapati Yuktaya Swasenaya Digvijayaya Nirgataha. Maharaj Parikshit sat on a chariot drawn by black horses. His flag was marked with the sign of the lion. Being so decorated and surrounded by charioteers, cavalry, elephants, and infantry soldiers, he left the capital to conquer in all directions. Let's continue, text 12. Bhadrashvam ketumalam cha bharatam chotaran kurun kim purushadini varshani vijitya jagre balim. Maharaj Parikshit then conquered all parts of the earthly planet, Bhadrashva, Ketumala, Bharata, the northern Kuru, Kim Purusha, and exacted tributes from their respective rulers. So this is all these different places that he actually conquered. And Prabhupada's talking about them, that how in Ketumala, you know, how this earth is divided into 7 oceans and how there are all these different varshas. And so he's talking about Bharat Varsha, talks about Bharat Varsha, all these different varshas. All right. It'll be interesting to know how it aligns itself to modern geography. Text 13 through 15. Tatra Pushinpana Swapurvesha Mahatmanam Pratigyamanam cha Vasaha Krishna Mahatmya Suchakam Atmanam cha Paritratam Ashwathamno Astra Tejasha Sneham cha Vrishne Parthanam Tesham Bhaktim cha Keshave Devya Parama Santushta Priti Uchram Bhrita Lochana Mahadhanani Vasamsi Tadau Haran Mahamanaha. Wherever the king visited, he continuously heard the glories of his great forefathers, who were all devotees of the Lord, and also the glorious acts of Lord Krishna. He also heard how he himself had been protected by the Lord from the powerful heat of the weapon of Ashwathama. People also mentioned a great affection between the descendants of Vrishni and Pritha due to the latter's great devotion to Lord Keshava. The king, being very pleased with the singers of such glories, opened his eyes in great satisfaction. Out of magnanimity, he was pleased to award them very valuable necklaces and clothing. So here we can see how he's wandering, and as he's wandering, he's only engaging in Krishna Katha, because wherever he goes, the residents of those people, whichever country he's visiting, they're actually glorifying, and they're saying how his forefathers, they were all great devotees, and so they're glorifying Arjuna and Yudhishthir and all these great personalities, and then they're also glorifying how Krishna was like their personal friend and their relative, and how he protected all his forefathers, but specifically how he protected Maharaj Parikshit. And just by hearing that, he's feeling such great satisfaction. So just this morning, actually, I was thinking that how this feeling of gratitude, like even when we are chanting, for example, if you can somehow cultivate, this understanding, this deeper understanding that I'm loved by Krishna. I'm deeply loved by Krishna. I'm protected by Krishna. He's my protector. He's my maintainer. And experience this gratitude towards Krishna and towards Krishna's representatives and his devotees. Then that actually is what will open up our heart. Because right now, all we are really trying to do is make our heart a softer place so that this creeper of bhakti, just like I remember when we first moved into this house, this was a new construction. So generally when you have a new construction and you try to plant something in your front yard or your backyard, all you get are like these big rocks. And as a result, the soil is very untilled and it's very hard. And you can feel it, that how are you going to plant such a tender little, you get a tender sapling. How is it going to be planted in this hard soil, filled with all kinds of rocks? So I remember the first few years, a huge part of our gardening adventure was just taking out those rocks and tilling the land and making it soft and adding fertile soil to it so that the soil could become conducive, and then you could plant something and get nice flowers. So our heart is just like that. Right now, the heart is hardened, jaded and hardened, embittered and resentful. And as a result, it's become cold and it's become hard. And so, we cannot really, so even though we're trying to plant this bhakti creeper and the seed is so powerful, and yet sometimes we find that it doesn't sprout, and if it sprouts, then it doesn't grow. And if it grows, then the weeds happen. And if that doesn't happen, then an elephant comes in and then destroys the entire garden. So there's so much, the process of growing this bhakti creeper is just like a gardener. And so that's why when we actually experience or take out time in our life to actually experience this deep feelings of gratitude, which is a grateful person, even if something very little is done to them, they will actually magnify that, and they'll experience so much of love towards that person. An ungrateful person, or rather the opposite of that, would be an entitled person. An entitled person always feels like whatever they have received has been their due, and what's the big deal? And so as a result of that, their heart never becomes soft, and the bhakti creeper never really grows. So that's why gratitude is actually not different from bhakti. And really, bhakti is nothing but gratitude in action. So that's why when we see that how the king, as he's visiting all these places, even though he has probably heard these glories countless times, he knows about his forefathers, but every time he hears about their glories, he becomes even more enthused. When he hears about Krishna's, glorious acts, how he protected, he becomes even more enthused. And so so sometimes we may say that how can you hear the same thing over and over and over again and continue to experience happiness? So here is the little key. The key is gratitude. When we feel gratitude, then every time we hear it, we become, even more happy and overwhelmed by these feelings of great gratitude, which leads to deep satisfaction. We'll read a little bit of what Prabhupada is saying here. Krishna and his unalloyed devotees cannot be separated, and therefore glorifying the devotee means glorifying the Lord, and vice versa. Maharaj Parikshit would not have been glad to hear about the glories of his forefathers like Maharaj Yudhishthir and Arjuna had they not been connected with the acts of Lord Krishna. The Lord descends specifically to deliver his devotees, Paritranaya Sadhana. The devotees are glorified by the presence of the Lord because they cannot live for a moment without the presence of the Lord and his different energies. So here we see that even though it's a welcome address, but because these are all devotees, so the welcome address itself becomes a form of kirtan. Text 16. Saratya parasad sevana sakya dotya virasananu gamana stavana pranaman man snigdeshu pandushu jagat pranatim cha vishnor Bhaktim karoti nripatis charanarvinde. Maharaj Parikshit heard that out of his causeless mercy, Lord Krishna, Vishnu, who is universally obeyed, rendered all kinds of service to the myriad sons of Pandu by accepting posts ranging from chariot driver to president to messenger, friend, night watchman, etc. According to the will of the Pandavas, obeying them like a servant and offering obeisances like one younger in years. When he heard this, Maharaj Parikshit became overwhelmed with devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord. So it's amazing when we hear about how Krishna is willing and what lengths Krishna is willing to go. And sometimes when we are told that we are aspiring to become a servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, we balk and we say, oh, that doesn't sound like fun. But here we see that how Krishna is so willing to accept such menial position in his service to the devotees. And actually, I was also thinking about something else this morning, that in the material world, the competition is who can be the greater than the greatest, right? Who is the fairest of them all? How can I be the greatest? How can I achieve the highest position? And I was thinking that in the spiritual realm, the competition is for who can be the great, who can be the the lowest of the servants. And because we understand, I was thinking about it that we understand that this whole material world is like a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And so in the material world, it's like the higher you go up, that's our aspiration. But in the spiritual world, the aspiration is that how can I attain a position which is even lower than this person? And that's where bhakti resides, and that's where Krishna is found in taking up those very, very humble position. And that's why bhakti is so difficult. Bhakti is difficult precisely because all our material projections don't really work here, right? I mean, in the material realm, we want to be, someone, and we want to be close to the biggest people, and then that's how we find our greatness. But in the spiritual realm, we find our greatness by taking on a humbler and a humbler and a humbler position. And so we see that with Krishna too, that he's the supreme person. So when he wants to become humble, when he wants to take on the role of a servant, then he is the greatest servant, right? And so you see that Srimati Radharani is the greatest servant. Govardhan Hill is the greatest servant, because who can serve more than Krishna? And so we see that how he's taking on all of these really, really humble positions, even a night watchman. Simply by appreciating the dealings of the Lord with his pure devotees, one can attain salvation. Isn't that an amazing point Prabhupada's making here? That simply by appreciating the dealings of the Lord with his pure devotees, one can attain salvation. So this is amazing. Text 17. Tashivam vartamanasya purvesham vrityaman vaham nati dure kilascharyam yad asittan nibodhame. Now we hear from me what happened while Maharaj Parikshit was passing his days hearing of the good occupations of his forefathers and being absorbed in thought of them. It's interesting that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he takes this word Vartamanasya and he makes it Anuvartamanasya, which means that continuously absorbed in such thoughts. So this is what we are also called to do, is to be continuously absorbed in the glorification of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. And simply by doing that, one will experience so much of the ecstasy and that love that we are desiring for. It's simply by, appreciating, the good qualities in others. Just by doing that one thing, one can actually attain everything that is to be attained in the process of bhakti. So it's so easy in one sense, right? Text 18. Dharma padeki charan vichayam upalabhyagam vichati smasru vadanam Vivatsam Iva Mataram, the personality of religious principles, Dharma, who was wandering about in the form of a bull. And he met the personality of earth in the form of a cow, who appeared to grieve like a mother who had lost her child. She had tears in her eyes, and the beauty of her body was lost. Thus, Dharma questioned the earth as follows. So here, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this is because Maharaj Parikshit was such a great yogi. So he's actually, this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually Maharaj Parikshit is seeing it in his meditation. So I'll just read you that little section. I found it very interesting because sometimes you look at this and you go, this feels like, okay, how does Dharma take on the form of a bull, and how does earth become cow? So here, let's see. So this is, I'm just going to read it from this book here by Gurujan Prabhu. Thus, as Parikshit is touring, he continues his meditation on the deeds of Krishna and the Pandavas. Commenting on text 18, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, right at the onset of Kali Yuga, Dharma, Prithvi, and Kali had assumed these shapes, although invisible to regular people. So it's not like regular people could see them. By this, one can understand that Maharaj Parikshit is seeing through his yoga-induced vision because of his desire to see these things. Thus, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment indicates that the events currently being described were only visible to Parikshit Maharaj in his meditative yogic trance. So I just wanted to make that point because I found that point very, very interesting. Now we can read a little bit of what Prabhupada is saying here. The bull is the emblem of the moral principle, and the cow is a representative of the earth. When the bull and the cow are in a joyful mood, it is to be understood that the people of the world are also in a joyful mood. So here we see that Dharma is represented by this bull, and earth is being represented in the form of a cow. And they're both actually afflicted in different ways. Cow, it looks like her child, she's just lost her child, she's crying, and then she doesn't appear beautiful anymore. And so now Dharma is asking earth, what's going on with you? So Dharma uvacha kachid bhadre namayam atmanaste vichayasi mleyati shanmukhena alakshaye bhavatim antaradhim dure bandhum sochasi kanchanam namba. Dharma, in the form of a bull, asked, Madam, are you not hale and hearty? Why are you covered with the shadow of grief? It appears by your face that you've become black. Are you suffering from some internal disease? Or are you thinking of some relative who is away in a distant place? So he's asking her all kinds of different ways, or giving her reasons like, are you sad because your relatives are all in a distant place? And Prabhupada makes this comment that in this age of Kali Yuga, the particular symptom of the age of Kali is that no family is now blessed to live together. To earn a livelihood, the father lives at a place far away from the son, or the wife lives far away from the husband, and so on. There are sufferings from internal diseases, separation from those near and dear ones, anxieties for maintaining the status quo. These are but some important factors which make the people of this age always unhappy. I was just thinking that, considering the fact that we are supposed to be living a materialistic life, we're not even doing a very good job living a materialistic life, because even our material life is we really have nothing to show for other than, Prabhupada would call our very expensive $30,000 cars like tin cars, right? That's our civilization. It's a civilization of tin cars. And so, even though we may have, great facilities in terms of time-saving gadgets, and we may have big houses and big cars, but the reality is that things that are really, really important for our happiness, which means that, to be around our family, our loved ones, internal, mental peace, the stress of life, the continuous and constant dissatisfaction because, there is no end to our desires. All of these different things, they make us not so happy in life. And so now, Dharma is asking cow, cow, that, what is wrong with you? You appear so sad. And it's like there's a shadow of grief. And we hear that right now, that, as every time you open up any kind of TV channel or news channel, all we hear about is how people are grieving for this reason or for that reason. There's so much sadness. And so rightfully so, Dharma is asking, why are you so sad? And I think we should continue this tomorrow. I think this section will end on text 25. So we'll do the next 5 verses tomorrow because they're all important verses. So we'll stop here and see what reflections or comments or questions you may have. Yes, Radhika.
Whole of Bhagavatam is very nectarian, but this section in general, like right from the Pandavas retiring and all of this, you can actually feel bhakti, right? Like how Krishna is saving the devotees all the time, doing all different kinds of things for his devotees. And the devotees, I think I read one paragraph here when you were reading. It is said that, just a minute, I'll read this. The Pandavas were so malleable for the will of the Lord that they could sacrifice any amount of energy for the service of the Lord. And by such unalloyed determination, they could secure the Lord's mercy in any shape they desired. So we can see that this is the qualification of the Pandavas, and in return what they get from Krishna. So the exchange of bhakti is, and it's not that it's reciprocation, it's not transactional. You can see that so beautifully. And also I was thinking that how like you were talking about gratitude and all of that, and how the rules of bhakti is not like the material rules are not applicable here. And so I think it's a very different world, basically. What it's not that I do something for you and you have to, the other person feels obliged to do in return, but rather the heart melts so much that whatever best we have, we want to offer that in return. So yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very nice, I think, and I really appreciated your sharing that purport from Prabhupada. It's so nice, and it's true, that they're like just like Prabhupada, right? He's saying that just I'm a puppet in your hands, and just make me dance as you like. And that's really what is needed for us to attract mercy is to let go of all of our self-interest, because these so-called self-interests that we have are really the interest of the ego. They're not really our self-interest, they're just the interest of the ego or the body. And so when we are able to let go of them and just be selfless, not have our own personal agenda as much as possible when we are serving Krishna. And if we have to have an agenda, our agenda could be just the pleasure of Guru and Krishna, then that's bhakti, and that attracts Krishna. Nice. Bhakti Lata, go ahead.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. So what really caught my attention is like how this culture of bhakti, or which is talked in Bhagavatam, is trying to bring out that culture of bhakti, which was already present in wherever he went. Parikshit Maharaj, he was able to see that all the tract of land are already talking about the glories of Krishna, which is unfortunately in the Kali Yuga, it has declined. And we are through Bhagavatam, through all the classes that you're doing, we are trying to revive that. So that really caught my attention.
Very nice. Yeah, it seems like and this is the secret of success. They actually did they did some kind of a study on the happiest places on the earth, and it's interesting that some of the happiest places are not places that you would consider, places with so much opulence. They didn't really appear on that list. So it's something to be said about internal cultivation of satisfaction and gratitude and mercy and truthfulness and simplicity. One time Lakshman Prabhu was telling us that he was traveling in Bengal in a very small village, and actually they were on a boat and they were going to all these far off villages near Mayapur, where they didn't even have television or radio or anything. And he was he loves photography, so he was carrying a very expensive bag with camera and all the other stuff. And so they went to this one house in some village, and he needed to, I think, go take a bath or something. I don't remember exactly. So he needed to leave his bag. And he was a little uncomfortable in the beginning because it contained like some very, very expensive equipment. But the other villager who was there with him, or maybe a devotee who was with him, told him that you have nothing to worry. Even though there were so many little kids, there were some young kids around as well. He said, you have nothing to worry about. He said, you could just leave your bag. No one's going to come and touch it even. And Prabhu was making this point that, that in those places, life is there's so much of contentment that even, like stealing or theft or greed, even though they may have so little, but they are just satisfied. And I think, sometimes when we go to India, of course, now we see a completely different world. But based on the writings of some of these explorers who came to India, I think one of the things I have read that they wrote about was they saw a country where there was no theft and there was no one, begging. So I think we have left that culture way behind. But even in the midst of that poverty, people were just content. And where does that contentment come from? It definitely doesn't come from getting more. I was actually having this conversation with Nima yesterday that, it's to find that satisfaction and that contentment, because there is already excess. It's not that there is less, but there is no end to that excess, right? There's always an upper limit, and then there's an upper limit. And how do you navigate your life, in a way that, success has to be redefined so that it doesn't just become a pursuit of that upper limit. Because every time, you climb a ladder, there's another rung on that ladder, and then there's another rung. And where do you, where is that ceiling? How do you decide what is enough? How much is enough? And what is success? Is success simply the climbing of a ladder, or does success contain other ingredients? And he was in agreement, and he was saying that yes, that is true, that if you don't have time, for all these other things, then success can be so, one-dimensional and ultimately not satisfying to the heart. So anyways, I've kind of taken off in a totally different direction, but appreciate your point. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Yes.
I really like the point about when you were explaining to increasing our spirituality in our life day to day, in the material world. We are striving for fame, name, power, money, like it goes on without any end to it. And
Yeah.
whereas in the spiritual world, we have to decrease our being gratitude and learning to be helping and appreciating. I really liked about that point, reflection.
Nice. Yeah.
And one more thing, the 3 points, the bhakti is explained to a gardener and the creeper, how we have to make the land ready for a sapling to grow. The same way, the bhakti we have to increase by listening to the glories of Krishna step by step, and reaching the abode of God. And how in Kali Yuga we are missing with all the anxieties, not able to live in closer to the family. Those things really touched me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah. Those rocks only give us pain, right? And then Kali Yuga, there's no dearth of, there is this continuous feeling that we're not adequate, or what I have is not adequate, or who we are is not adequate. And, if I don't achieve, this, and this, then my life is a failure. And it's just a burden that we carry. And the sad thing is that even when you get there, one still continues to be a failure, feel like a failure, because there's always a higher position. It's like a carrot, right? It's always dangling there, and you say, okay, I still haven't arrived there. So that doesn't mean that we become, we give up a desire for, growth or but at the same time, if it's done from a place of fullness rather than from a place of inadequacy, then it won't frustrate us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on the point about, how Krishna really likes it when his devotees, glorify him, and how, he, even though the devotees are always protected by Krishna, he sometimes puts them in danger, and, and then, protects them at the same time. So, they can glorify him. So So this exchange is very interesting. Technically there is no danger, but it's just I think the devotees feel more connected to Krishna because of that.
Yeah, it's nice. I like the way you put it, that puts them in danger and then protects them. Yeah, it's an exchange. Prabhupada says it's an exchange of transcendental rasa between the devotee and Krishna. It's nice. Thank you. Anybody else?
Love the example you gave about your backyard, cultivating the soil, taking the rocks out and all that. We all have to do it. It's time, but eventually get there. Loved it. And
Thank
whatever
you.
Kavita mentioned, I love those points too, becoming cloud. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Anyone else? Jeanette, anything from you?
Good morning, Mataji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Yeah, there's so much. I'll share with the group. You already know, Mataji. 3 years ago, I was going through a really heartbreaking divorce, and the only thing I could do was cry out to God, who now I know as Krishna. And all through that time, he helped me. He helped me with just step by step. And I wake up lately just, saying, thank you, Krishna. Just thank you, Krishna. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you for sharing that. And sometimes when we are together, we don't realize, the rarity of each person that comes to Krishna. And we definitely feel that about you, Jeanette. And, on each one of you, actually, that it's a rare, rare soul. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. It's not just a sentimental thing. Krishna says out of thousands, one person will inquire, and out of those thousands, one will know me in truth. And then for us to be actually able to experience gratitude, I think today's theme has been sort of gratitude. But Krishna, this is actually the definition of pure bhakti. This is what is pure bhakti, as described by Rupa Goswami and also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that one who can continue to say thank you as one is going through life, experiencing the reactions of one's past deeds, then that person becomes eligible to attain the kingdom of God because it has become his rightful claim. So just this one thing, if we can just continue to do that as things happen in our life, which it will, we can, just because we have become devotees, sometimes, there are people, they take up the principle of spiritual life and then they think they're now no more, nothing will happen, but that's not true. Even devotees go through disease, they go through death, they go through trials and tribulations and difficulties. And in the midst of all of that, this is where the rubber meets the road, is when we can wake up every morning and we can say to Krishna, thank you, Krishna. And then feel that, that is very, very attractive to Krishna, and Krishna immediately becomes endeared to such a devotee. So thank you for that example. So I guess it's 10:44. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Raj, Ramesh. Krishna, you have a very nice name, Prabhu. So, thank you for joining.